Well, I'm excited to have John here. So I might be hyperventilating just a little bit, but only a little bit, when I say John is one of the greatest success stories that's come out of the entrepreneurship program here at BYU. He was co-founder of Omniture, and if you follow the news, you know that they sold to Adobe a few years ago for $1.8 billion. That started out as JP Interactive, back in the day when he was in school doing websites. It was Johnny Pestana Interactive. Is that what the JP stands for? Or maybe not Johnny, but John?
Well, it was John Pestana, and then we started saying James Pestana.
Oh, then James Pestana. Oh, got it. Then it was James Pestana. Okay, good. Okay. Anyway, so John helped build and grow Omniture to a company of more than 1,200 people, 1,200 employees. That's an amazing size for somebody who thinks about starting with just you and your partner, and then you scale to 1,200 employees. They became a publicly traded company in 2006, and it was November of 2009 when they sold to Adobe. John has been highly decorated. For example, my center named him Entrepreneur of the Decade, and he received an Entrepreneur of the Year award from Ernst and Young. He's involved in a couple of startups, at least a couple of startups right now, ExactRail and ObservePoint. I hope he'll just say a little bit about that as he talks about his background. He's also a real estate investor and an angel investor who has been involved in a number of deals over the years. Let's see, what else do I want to say? So we love John. We love his wife, Heidi. They're the parents of 3 wonderful children, and they're wonderful friends to the center and to BYU. And we're so grateful for the opportunity we have to work with them, and I'm very excited to welcome John to campus today. Please join me in welcoming him.
Great. You're just going to sit back there? You're observing me? If I say something wrong, you push me off?
No, just in case I need a big...
I must smell bad. Nobody sat up in the front. So, if anybody has questions as we're walking through some things today, feel free to just ask. I'm pretty casual, as you can tell. But I think that you get that in software. I was actually telling Scott Peterson as we were walking down here that about a month ago I decided I don't really ever want to wear a coat again. So I'm just doing the polo shirts right now. So I'm prepared to golf at any moment. That's good. So my journey started back at BYU, and now I'm starting to feel pretty old. That was in 1995. I came here to BYU after my mission. And in a class, I met Josh James and Dr. McKell's class, which I think is he retired now, or is he? Yeah, he's retired now, but that's where Josh and I met. And as Josh tells the story, I corrected, or updated, I like to say, Dr. McKell on a few things in technology. And there was a group project, so Josh came down and asked if he could be in his group. So that's how we met and became partners in a business. My first business was called JP Graphics, actually. That's how I started it. This is prior to Josh. And I just was building websites for people. You can see I had a little more hair. The stress of business, I guess, takes that out of you. And I was just trying to make some extra money. I was actually managing a computer lab on campus, but in the evenings I was building websites. To do it, my wife and I, we had just gotten married. We sold all of our wedding presents, took her savings, my savings, and bought this computer so we could start a company. You know, you only need so many toasters, right? And actually, what's interesting, that where you're seeing my computer, that's one room. We lived in a 20-foot by 20-foot room with our bed, everything all in this one little room. So it was good. Josh, when he came on board, we changed the name to JP Interactive, and we started building websites for people. So this is back in 96 when we started building websites. And we actually built quite a few fairly big websites. And one of the things that I realized as I was building websites for other people was that they were making money and I was just billing hours, which, as you know, you never get wealthy billing hours, really. You need to be taking advantage of technology and letting it work for you. And so I remember this one website we built for a guy, and we charged him about $30,000 to make the website. And he ended up selling it for $10 million. And I was just like, I built that. Like, why didn't we do that instead of him? You know, it's not that I was really jealous. It was just like, why didn't we think of doing that? So we started building other websites. In our downturn, you know, when you're running a web development company, you kind of have the ups and downs when you're working for somebody else, but then all of a sudden they call you and say, hey, don't work on this for a little bit. I'm sitting there with a couple guys that I'm paying on an hourly basis. I got to get them working on something because I have to pay them whether or not somebody else is paying me. And so we started building some other websites, and one of them was scriptsearch.com, which was a resource for CGI scripts, which are the little back-end programs that kind of run the internet. So I was definitely a little bit of a dork. You know, when I came here to BYU in '95 after my mission, you know, the internet was really just starting to take off. I had heard about it on my mission. I had always liked computers, so I used to do a little bit of programming on computers. And I had a friend who introduced me to the Internet Club here on campus in 1995, and I joined the Internet Club, and we started being dorks together. It was fun. And so I invested a little bit of money in building this website, and then this is while I was a student. I sold it to a company for $200,000. And really that's kind of what sparked it for Josh and I of thinking, you know, we should keep doing this. We should keep building things that we can either sell or leverage. But we had a ton of little failed ones. We tried one called J Servers, which was a virtual server company. We had another friend who had done a V Servers and I Servers. We're like, oh, let's see if we can sell servers. We built a web page builder. We did a gaming website, Computer Underground. And, you know, a lot of these things just kind of, not that they were horrible, but they just weren't really doing anything for us. But then we started one called Superstats. And this was a small website where you could go and we would give you some code, and when you put it on your website, we would get an ad banner, and you would get stats about your page. And it started taking off like crazy. I want to say it was like within the first month, we had like 100,000 page views a day going on this website. Or ad views, happening on our customers. Which then led us into, we raised some money, started growing that business, and we created a company called mycomputer.com. So, we had our little tiny stats product. We had guest books. We had like 9 or 10, I can't even remember, roughly 10 products that we were selling to all these little websites that they could use. Some were free, some were paid. PC World ranked us in the top 16 hottest sites on the internet there for a while. It was an interesting time in the internet, too, because there wasn't, they were really picky about if you weren't in Silicon Valley, you must be stupid. So it really hurt us. We probably would have sold for a ton of money if we had been in the Valley amongst everybody else. So we built this, and then the internet crash happened, and we had raised money at a $60 million valuation. We were doing like $4 million in revenue. Things were going good. People stopped spending money on ads. And, there's Josh and I. He looks a lot different now. Has anybody seen Josh recently? He has big flowing hair now. And so we decided to sell off the mycomputer.com small business stuff and focus just on our enterprise analytics package, which at the time we called Superstats Enterprise. And I'm just so you guys know, honestly, this is just to give you a little history of me. Not even really what I'm going to talk about, but just to give you a little insight into me. And so we started with the Superstats Enterprise, and we're trying to target now just big companies using analytics. We didn't have we had it when we sold off mycomputer.com. We actually had 2 million customers using our product, and as we started to focus on this, we're like, we probably should change our name from Superstats to something else. I used to always joke, since we're going to be really serious, let's call ourselves Super Duper Stats. That makes you like you're an enterprise software company. So we brainstormed for a few weeks, and we came up with Omniture, which is omniscience and future mixed together. The bars underneath Omniture are Morse code for the letter O, right? We did the white, green. It's monitor, identify, and drive ROI. Since we were an analytics company, that's So there was a little meaning in everything that we were trying to do with our logo. That hurt our head for a couple weeks to come up with that. But it worked really well for us. I really liked that we actually came up with something that didn't really mean anything, so we were able to just create that whole brand. We really owned the color green. I don't know if any of you guys remember. We used to have green everywhere, and everything was solid green. We never used other colors. So, we grew that to actually, 1,200 or so employees. We took funding from VC firms, ended up raising a lot of money, going public, and then being sold. And that whole journey was basically 13 years for me, a lot of my life, but a really fun journey. Now Josh, when he left, he went and he started a new company called Domo. If other people have heard of that one, and then my new company is called ObservePoint, and we do online data quality assurance. I have 35 people here in Provo. Doing really well, and you can tell our color is yellow. You have to always pick a color and just own it. Some interesting, great books on branding if you ever want to read, and I remember we read this one called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Branding, and it talked about how you should just own a color. Don't pick a color your competitor uses because you just reinforce them every time you advertise. They gave the example of like Coke and Pepsi where, Coke is just red, but Pepsi has their exact red in their marketing. And so every time they're advertising, subconsciously they're reinforcing Coke. And I actually totally agree with that. It feels right to me. And so we've always just embraced a color. So this time I'm embracing yellow. Does anybody know what color Josh is embracing this time? In sky blue, right? Carolina blue, I think is what he'll tell you it is. So ObservePoint and data quality assurance, and there's probably, I guess, a lesson to be learned in this too, is like, so I made all my money in analytics and online software. And when I decided on what was the next thing I wanted to do, I stayed in my wheelhouse. This sells to the exact same customer base. We're basically making sure online data is accurate. We audit websites to make sure all their tracking technologies are functioning properly, their behavioral targeting systems, ad systems, that they're all the code that's on all these pages is functioning right. So it makes it easier for me to understand that customer because I've just been in this world. I felt like this was the number one problem that we had at Omniture. And so that's what I'm trying to solve here. And so far, it's been working. We do millions of dollars of revenue, and it's been great. What I want to talk about, though, because I was trying to think about, for you guys as potential entrepreneurs wanting to start your business, of which I highly recommend. I'm actually a dropout of BYU. Not that that's necessarily good or bad. It just is what happened in my case. And I absolutely have tons to thank BYU for. It's where I met my business partner, really got started, was encouraged, all these things. But as you're looking at businesses and what you might be wanting to do, I think you need to look at technology and the speed of technology and how that might affect even your career path. If you're looking at different careers and what you're doing, will those careers exist in 10 years? So 50 years ago, you had these big specialized computers, right, that only the biggest corporations would buy because they had very specific functions that they were trying to do. To today, we all have a computer. Every single one of us have multiple computers on us right now. And they serve all kinds of generic purposes. They aren't very specialized anymore, and they can do lots of different things. And then we have, what's next? This is that HoloLens technology. Have anybody seen this yet? It's a Microsoft technology where literally you put this thing on. And unlike Google Glass, honestly, I tried Google Glass, and I was like, I don't know why anybody would want to use this. Actually, all the cool reasons I could think of why I'd want to use it, like they had banned people from using it for. Like I'd love it if it just saw somebody's face and reminded me who they were, or things like that. And but this actually presents things in front of you, So like you can sit there and imagine if you were watching a sporting event, you could see the field and it could outline all the things like you see on TV right on the field while you're actually watching it. there's a lot, not that it does it right now, but those are like the type of capabilities that you could see this technology doing in the future. Whether you're an architect and you stand on a lot, you actually could sit there and visually see the building on your lot because it's actually combining reality with virtual reality. It's very fascinating. But where are computers going? Who knows? One thing I think when you look at history, you realize that nobody has any clue what the future is, right? Just watch the Back to the Future episode where they go in the future, right? Which was technically, I think, this year in it. And it's nothing like what today is. In a lot of ways, we're way more advanced, actually, than what they thought we would be, but just in a totally different way. We just don't have a hoverboard. Communications, right? We had these phones. Did anybody here ever interact with a party line? Did you never ever have a party line? Where you shared a phone line with other people and stuff like that? I definitely had the dial phone when I was first growing up. I served my mission in Brazil where I almost knew nobody who had a phone. Nobody had a phone. There would be 2 members in each ward that maybe would have a phone. Everybody has a phone now. Literally everybody has a phone, whether or not it's a smartphone or not, but even the poorest countries, for the most part, everybody has a mobile device. And, where is that going to go, whether it's a watch, whether it's FaceTime, whatever it is. Just things are moving at an incredible pace. I was wondering about even, when will the day come where instead of even sitting here in class, you just sat at home, put your Oculus Rift on, and attended class, right? Why even be here? Things are going to change. Transportation. We got our 65 Chevelle right here. I was trying to figure out actually why they made a new one, but never was a big fan of the Chevelle, but they just launched a new one. But there's a lot of changes. We have so much technology, and actually almost political is the only reason that cars aren't driving themselves down the streets right now. You saw that Utah just banned Tesla, or wasn't allowing them to open a store, unfortunately. I'll try and fix that for everybody. I run a public policy institute, so we were fighting against them, but we lost that one, I believe, by only 1 vote. But, is it Uber mixed with a Google car? Are there even cars at all? Think how much, again, you embrace Oculus Rift or other technologies like that. Would that really limit how much you even needed to go places? So my daughter, her best friend, lives in Minnesota. And they met online. They communicate via FaceTime and all those things. She's been out there a few times. Her friend's been out here a few times, but they talk every single day. It's just kind of an interesting world that a lot of the younger generation, I think, is really starting to embrace. And I think it works for her because, she was able to find somebody who had just so much similar interests when you're looking at such a broad group as the internet. They met on actually fan fiction because they both love to write. But, do we get a Hyperloop? Who knows what we get and where transportation, how that would change the world. Think about, if somebody invented a teleporter, the world would never be the same, ever. All right, so what was the name of my first business? Who said that? Right there? Come get $100. Everybody was looking asleep, so we'll make it more fun. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So and the reason I'm even bringing up all this, I want you to just think about as you're thinking about your business, how does it fit into this new world? I really do think that in 50, 100 years, which, obviously we'll all be old, but as we think about our kids, grandkids, the world will be very, very different. There won't be the jobs. I really think that our future world is a world of 0% employment, where nobody does really anything, because robots and things are doing everything except for, and your robot's bringing you your pina colada while you're sitting on the beach, kind of a thing. So think about that as you're building a business, because I think that the key is as you're building automation and you're making productivity increase, there's a lot of money to be made there if you want to set yourself apart from everybody else. I really do think if you're just going to go be a staff accountant somewhere, that probably won't exist in 15 years. We'll get to this. Sorry, I'm ADD, so you'll find I'll go all over the place on you. So, manufacturing, same thing. Very, specialized things. So, like, you had everybody building a car by hand. It then went to very specialized robots, right? So everybody thinks, oh, these robots aren't going to replace me. And they actually did replace tons of people, but they still were very specialized. You had to be doing mass manufacturing. Steve had mentioned I own a model train company. Because we do such limited runs of toy trains, we actually don't have anything that's really automated except for plastic injection. They're all built by hand. But, in the future, maybe they're just printing them. This is a guy who prints a car. Or maybe there's a cool robot called Baxter, where this is much more of a general purpose robot. You actually visually show Baxter what to do, and he just does it. So it's not like the super highly specialized machines of old. And even robotics of old weren't actually super expensive. Like the actual robot, like that would sit there working on a car, was only like $30,000 in a lot of cases. But it would cost you $150,000 to program it because it was so specialized. Where these, if they're coming up with better ways, and I still believe Baxter is equivalent of like a computer from 1980. I think we're going to see these where they get to a point where Baxter's folding your laundry, Baxter's doing all these other types of things. I've actually wanted to buy one just to see if I could program it to fold my laundry. Because they're actually really cheap. They're like $30,000, which, for such sophisticated technology, I honestly was expecting it to be $100,000 or more. Not that $30,000 is cheap, but just in comparison, to what you would think. So it's just fascinating, how can you use this in your business? Farming. Do you guys know that like back 50 years ago, for every 1,000 people that worked in farming 50 years ago, it's only like 50 people work in farming today. And that's what's made us all be able to go to school and made us all be able to, play around a lot more than we do. I remember growing up, it seemed like nobody ever went on vacation. There was only a few kids who took these week vacations here and there. Now it seems like everybody that goes on vacation. From the plumber to whoever, they take a nice week's vacation. It's just kind of become a common thing. And I think that's because we've again become more and more productive, which then allows everybody to be wealthy. Without productivity, you can't have wealth for all. You can only have wealth for a few. Here we have agriculture. I was in Germany, and I was walking through a vineyard in Germany, and we were walking up to the top of a hill, and I looked over, and I saw a robot picking all the grapes. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I was like, oh, there's another job gone, And again, you hear the president, you hear a lot of people always talk about employment. They're always worried about employment. And I always tell people, I could solve employment tomorrow. Just make snowplows illegal, hand everybody spoons, It doesn't solve, employment doesn't solve any problems. Productivity solves problems, right? Again, striving towards building a world where through technology, we are making all people wealthy. This is the only way that you'll have every single person on the planet be able to eat, every single person be able to drive their Ferrari, whatever it is that they want to do in life is through productivity. So never be upset. Every single time you ever hear somebody like they're closing down a factory because of automation, you should shout hooray. It really is traumatic for people, and I think that we should encourage trying to come up with social programs to make sure those people get retrained or do whatever to help them, but we should always embrace the technology because, again, in the long run, the technology helps all of us. So, to sum up that, technology improves productivity, creates wealth for all of us. Technology frees up time. My new company, what we're doing actually, it's kind of interesting because it just literally wasn't done before. Because it was so hard to do manually. We had a company that we were just working at, that I actually spoke with at the Adobe conference, where they were trying to check all their websites by hand to make sure the Omniture code or the Adobe Analytics code. And I might be talking a little technical for some of you right now, but basically there's this JavaScript code that they had to validate all these variables that were being set on the pages. They had a couple people spend 8 weeks trying to validate what was going on. And they came up with their solution. They then finally called us, and we're like, great, we can get to that to you, this afternoon. Does that work? Kind of a thing. Because we have a technology that does the work of what it would take thousands of people. My technology can scan through a website of millions of pages, check every variable that's on the website perfectly, right? How many of us have the attention span to check through all of that? None of us do. And so I think we just have to embrace that and understand, how do we leverage this in our business? My ideal business, like if I really could build my dream job, it would have like 4 people in the whole company. 1, because I hate doing anything at the accounting, so I'd have an accountant worry about all the accounting. I'd have a salesperson worry about sales. And I'd have the 3rd guy, so he worried about anything else, so then I don't ever have to talk to anybody. That would be my perfect company. Yeah.
So at your company right now, your 35 employees, are they like devs, or what do they do?
Yeah, it's a typical software setup, right? So in a software company, you have your very heavy development, your very heavy sales, and very heavy support, and then very light in accounting or any of those other areas. Dev and sales are my 2 biggest areas, because even support, we really try and make sure we're always automating as much as possible. I don't know about you, but I hate visiting a website that I cannot do everything just via the interface. Like, if I have to call somebody, I'll just cancel the service, kind of a thing. And so I really, and we're because we're enterprise software, we're getting there. Like, I just want to always be figuring out, how do you automate that? Isn't it frustrating, like when you sign up for something online, but then they won't let you cancel it online? And that's just because they're trying to screw you. It's not that it's not easy for them to create a button that says cancel. Where I'm not afraid, I will have a cancel button if somebody wants to cancel. If somebody doesn't want my product, I don't want to force them to own my product. We actually used to always be monthly, and we actually switched to annual contracts just because we deal with big businesses, and they didn't actually know how to handle really doing a monthly contract because they don't want to go through the procurement process often. So we ended up switching to annual just because our customers were literally demanding, hey, we just need annual 2-year, 3-year contracts because I don't want to go through procurement and all these other things on a regular basis. So it's just interesting. Any other questions at this point? So I was going to actually show you guys, have you guys seen this video? So when I first watched that video, I actually only noticed the lady with the pig. That was the only change I noticed. How many of you guys noticed more than one thing change? Several of you. But how many everybody noticed everything that changed? See, that's just proof that a computer would have noticed every single change that we saw. Every single one. Would have documented it, would have done everything that you wanted. So a computer doesn't have to be smarter than you. It just has to be, good at a few things to replace most of the things that we do. I would encourage you guys, I'm not going to let you, or not bring it up right now, but a lot of what I'm talking about actually came from this video here, Humans Need Not Apply. I saw it and honestly just kind of made me sit there and think, because I was thinking about my kids and like, how does the world apply to them? And he'll walk you through, it's a 15-minute video, and he walks through like technology and how it's going to affect us and where things really are right now. Like literally there are robots that write music and symphonies that people can't even tell the difference between one written by a robot and one written by a human. And one of my favorite quotes that he and I'll paraphrase it, but he says in it, he's like, imagine horses sitting around in the early days when mechanical things were making them irrelevant. They used to just go, oh, I'm actually glad this thing's doing all the heavy lifting. Now I don't have to plow the fields. I'm just taking people around town. Life's really good. And that's kind of the phase we're in right now. But then eventually they became completely irrelevant. And if we said, in the phrase he says, if somebody said to you, better technology makes better jobs for horses, we'd all laugh at that. We literally were just like, what are you talking about? That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. But if you say, but you hear people all the time say that better technology makes better jobs for people. But as we build more and more robotic brains, when will that be irrelevant? It's fascinating stuff. And it's actually, I believe that's why it's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs right now. You grab onto this thought of, hey, how can we build something? How can I automate something? Go into a field. I mean, there's so many fields right now that have barely embraced technology, and try and automate something for them. You'll make millions of dollars. And remember that as an entrepreneur, you do not have to invent really anything. You just have to make something better, right? So just go in, make something better. So do you have any questions? What would you guys like to? It could be about anything. Yeah.
I have a question. So you're not the first guest lecturer to kind of speak about robotics and advancement.
Yeah.
And how it's replacing a lot of jobs and employment. And obviously this works out for guys like you that are developers and are in the computer science realm. So how can we draw that whole line of when our technology is advancing the human state or making it better for people, or if it's making it worse?
Well, I don't think that you'll see much of anything get developed that's making it necessarily worse. I think for overall humanity, I think that anytime you see technology come in, the people who are losing jobs, they'll talk about how horrible it is, right? But can anybody here give me an example of where a union stopped technology, where they actually won? I mean, does anybody see any candle makers out there or buggy whip manufacturers? The technology is always going to win. They might delay it, right? And so it's just how do you get on board with that? There will be no taxi drivers here in 50 years. They might be able to delay it, pass a law for a little while, but there will be no taxi drivers. There will be no truck drivers. There will be no anything. And the interesting thing is if we actually cared about people, in my mind, we would instantly try and strive for that. I mean, 43,000 people a year roughly are killed in car accidents in the United States every year. If we just took all the money we spend on wars murdering other people, we could bring that money and instantly say, buy everybody a Google car and save 43,000 people's lives every year. So, technology, I think, and I'm, just so you know, I'm not a hardcore developer. I'm not coding anything. I started off programming a lot more, but nowadays I'm just more of a inventor, architect type person. But, yeah, I think that you can't stop it. And the only time I've ever heard of technology being bad for somebody was because they were upset about losing their job to it, not because it really was a bad thing. Unless you're talking about like war devices or something like that, then yeah, I think it's a bad thing. A question?
You talked about a couple other companies that you own. So this might be kind of a sideways question, but how do you determine what's a good investment, what's a bad investment? What's your criteria?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when I made a lot of money, you obviously just have to figure out what to do with it. So I started doing investing. I quickly found out that I don't really pay attention very well to investing in small companies. To me, so many ideas are really great ideas, but it really comes down to execution of people. And I tend to just be a believer in all people. So I'd make bad decisions. I'd give a guy $500,000 here, $500,000 there, and watch it all go down the tubes because I just liked the idea, but really it's almost always execution problem, not an idea problem. But then I was able to slowly generate concepts for myself and where, hey, I only invest a certain amount of money. I only follow along with a VC or somebody who's willing to do all the due diligence. And right now, actually, I only invest through VCs. So I just give a VC money and say, so when somebody even asks me, I say, you know what, I invest via Boom Startup and Peak Ventures. If you want my money, that's basically where you have to go to get it. And just letting people be experts. Now, the one exception to that is I decided to get into real estate, where I was willing to take the couple years and become an absolute expert in real estate. And I house thousands of people in apartment complexes, in companies, in office buildings. We have a ton of real estate. And that was just more of I have to figure out what to do with money because I don't trust money managers. I don't own any stocks, things like that. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Right up there, glasses.
So a lot of big heads right now are worried about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
On their page.
Yeah.
So there comes a point in technology when decisions are made by technology. Where do you fall in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, I see their point, and I agree that it could get there. It'll be interesting to see when. I'll be surprised if we see that in our lifetime myself. Just we're still, just so behind that. Like, because computers are still they're making a lot of decisions, but they're only making decisions that they were told to make. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't study it enough to really know from an AI perspective. Because there's intelligence, and then there's the mimicking of intelligence, which I think that's what computers are getting really good at, and they're really fast at it. But it'll be interesting to see if it can then create something new that's never been done before, right? That's really where that spark will happen. So, again, do they follow the laws of robotics or something to make sure they don't hurt humans? We've all seen iRobot, right? Where they're going to start hunting us down. Yeah, and honestly, I really think could get there. I mean, but the hard thing too is somebody's going to for sure create a machine that they program for war to kill people, and that's the scary one. Where now you have a machine that's being told to kill people, and if that now starts just thinking, hey, how can I annihilate the human race? And if it's so much faster and better, like how many of us have played any video games where like you set the computer to hard? It's not even possible, right, to beat the computer. And what's funny is that's literally like the computer set on super easy, like for what compared to what the computer really could do, right? So last thing I want to get in is a gunfight with some robot that can see all the way around it, is using heat vision. There's no way you could ever beat that. All right, let's just all go home, cry in the corner. This is too depressing. I'm actually a really happy person. So. Yeah, right here.
So you're talking about like you started up differently and had websites and things like that. How have you seen that change for like internet domain acquisition and things like that? Being able to get like a certain address. How has that changed that you've seen in the last?
Yeah, so he asked about how has like internet changed from like buying domains and things like that because it's gotten a lot harder. When I first started, I could literally just go to internet and buy a domain name and Network Solutions, and it was like $9, I think, at the time. Or they were free, actually, I think, originally. And then it went to $9 and then up to $30 or whatever. And so my last name's Pestana. I remember searching. I'm like, oh, I want to buy Pestana. And then I'm like, oh, do I want .com, .net, or .org? Like, all three are open. Like, just buy them. I'm like, you know what? Let's do .net. I'm not really a company, And what's just funny because Pestana is actually a huge hotel chain in Portugal. So if I had bought the .com, I probably could have sold it to them for like $250,000 or something like that later. And then I remember another one. I was sitting and I was like, oh, maybe I should buy some other fun domains. And I was like, oh, let's see, dentist.com. Oh, it's available. Oh, it's $30. I don't know if I want to pay $30 for a domain name. And I didn't buy it. But I do have a few that I sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Actually, the most I've ever sold a domain name for is $250,000. But you can, so like one of my criteria is when I do start a company right now is I just want to buy the domain name. If I can't get it for $1,000, I'm just going to come up with another name. And when you make up words like ObservePoint or Omniture, honestly, it's pretty easy to find a domain name that hasn't been taken. And if you do a made-up word like that too, the guy who might own it knows he's only going to get a few $100 or $1,000 for it. So I do think that it's no different than real estate. Back in the early days of America, it was free land. Everybody go and get their free land. And same thing with the internet. It was free domains. Everybody go get their domains.
And just in the news the other day, we have now the .sucks
Yeah.
domain. They're going for up to $2,500. Anyway.
Yes.
FYI.
No BYU.sucks, you guys, okay? Control yourselves. It's BYU.awesome.
There we go.
So with all this automation and advances in technology, especially with where we automate a
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't. I love philosophy, so if anybody wants to just come to my office and talk for hours and hours about this stuff, I like to think about it. And, as I've put some thought into it, I've wondered, what that world will be like, because what I worry about is the only thing that the robots and things could never do, is basically create natural resources, right? So will you end up with a society where you have these super wealthy people who politicians have decided control all the natural resources, and then everybody else? Could we run into some weird society, like where no fault of their own, people just literally, there are no jobs, like with the horses, like where are the jobs for the horses? I don't know. They don't exist. And, would you have to have a basic standard of living that everybody is kind of guaranteed as a human right because everything is done by machines, which I'm not necessarily opposed to. I'm actually even a super hardcore libertarian, basically. But who knows what that world would look like when, as long as you aren't taking from somebody else, how do you deal with that? It's a great question. And unfortunately, I don't think our political infrastructure is designed for that at all. It's kind of a little bit the selfish mentality that we have amongst everybody. Yeah.
So you mentioned that there are a lot of opportunities to automate different industries that aren't very technology advanced.
Yeah.
What are some of these industries?
I don't know. I'm not in them. But I guarantee you could put me at any company, and within a day or two, I could tell you 5 or 6 things that they could do and automate better. A good example of this is like when I went on my mission. So I showed up at my mission home. I work the first 5 or 6 months, and then I get called to be the secretary of my mission. I go into the office, and there's like 4 elders working in the office, plus 2 APs helping out too. And they were doing everything by hand, like literally like letters to parents, like typing them on typewriters. This is 1991, so this is still pretty dang early, really. I mean, Windows 3.1 just came out. They had printers, but again, on their computer, they were just typing letters and then printing them out. And so I went to my mission president. I said, hey, FYI, this is like crazy. I said, can you give me 1 month and I'll write you a program that you can send all these guys back out. And so I actually went out and I bought Microsoft Access, actually, and I wrote a whole Access application that typed all the letters. If I had a new missionary, I said, oh, it's a sister, and here's her name. It printed all the letters. It wrote a letter to her parents. I signed my mission president's name and sent it off to them. And basically, I replaced all 4 of those elders that were working in the office to me working half-time, in a matter of 30 days. So you have to, I think when you start any business, because it's really hard when you're sitting outside to think what to do. I would have never started an analytics company if I hadn't been building websites. So you need to get into whatever industry you want to be in, whether it's working for somebody or just start with anything. Go from there, discover what you can automate, make better, provide good customer service, and you'll make tons of money. And my final thought is, remember, you're the only person who wants to pay yourself $1 million a year. There is no other person who wants to pay you $1 million a year. They might think you earned it, so they might do it, but they'd rather pay somebody less. And when you're paying yourself $1 million a year, what are you thinking? How do I make $2 million a year, right? And you're happy to do it. So just remember that. Anyway, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jim.